I remember my very first day on campus. I grew up in a rural town in Kentucky, 1,500 people, and I went to a school in Cambridge, Massachusetts. I'd never even visited the campus. I crossed the crosswalk. We didn't have any crosswalks where I grew up, and a car honked at me. I thought, what are the odds? I've been here an hour and already met somebody I know. I turned around and waved at the car. I think they were waving back with one finger, but what that showed me is these people may have different ideas or a different upbringing than I had. Ms. Strawson articulated a threshold for reasonable expectation of whether something is hate speech or whether it's protected or not. Mr. Lawrence, she said it would maybe the threshold should be reasonable expectation that it would instill fear of violence or harm. Would you like to, in less than 30 seconds, if you could, sort of articulate the standard of what might be protected and what might not?
Yeah, I think that Professor Strawson and I are in roughly the same place on this. I would just focus more, as we often do in the criminal law, on the intent of the actor. So was it behavior that was intended to threaten or intimidate? Not to confound, not to trouble, not to raise new opinions,
right,
but to threaten or to intimidate.
Okay. I've got a document here you may recognize. It's the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. If I brandish this, Mr. Lawrence, in your presence, are you intimidated? Does it strike fear in your heart? Do you think that harm may come to you very soon?
I think it is actually much safer than crossing the street in Cambridge, Massachusetts.
I would agree, but the administrators at the Kellogg Community College don't. They arrested students for handing out a Constitution. Can you imagine that? That's the height of irony. How far has this ridiculousness gone if students are arrested for handing out constitutions? This is the document that contains the First Amendment, the protection in there. I think maybe we have gone too far if this is now recognized as something that passes that threshold. Mr. Corolla, I know King George may have found this to be insightful, but do you find it
a basketball player? I don't keep up. On the Kings. I was just having a thought. No, I'm sorry, continue your
No,
question.
I just want to know, is this a threatening document? Does this cross the threshold?
Not unless there's a knife hidden inside of it.
Right.
No. But as I was hearing everyone speak, I never went to college. There's something I would like to touch on very quickly, which is going through diversity training, going to college. We're all sitting here, first off, under the assumption that 100% of kids go to college. I didn't know anyone who went to college, so I had to figure out a way to be a decent human being, not to be racist, not to be filled with hate, to be tolerant, minus college. I think that starts at home. So if you get to 18 or 19, I believe the cement on the sidewalk of your brain has already dried, and good luck carving your initials into it with diversity training. If you're a bad kid and we get hold of you in college, you're probably just going to be a bad adult. You need to learn to be a good human being from zero to college instead of us all converting you once you get to college. And especially since more than half the people don't end up in college. So we're sitting here with a grand plan of how to coach everyone up once they get to college. What if they never get to college? What about their parents, and what kind of job are they doing coaching the kids up so that they need no coaching whether they go to college or not?
Mr. Shapiro, I'm going to assume you don't find this to be a threatening or harmful document.
I've brandished it at a few people myself, yeah.
Look, the college's defense when they arrested these students, by the way, they spent overnight in jail, 7 hours in jail for handing out constitutions. You said something earlier that struck me, that time, place, and manner regulations are being used to restrict free speech, because that's what the college said to these students who belong to Young Americans for Liberty. They said if you'd just filled out the paperwork, if you'd stood 100 feet over there instead of where you're standing, and if you'd done it at this time, we would have allowed you to hand out our nation's founding document. Can you speak to how time, manner, and place restrictions are being abused?
So most obviously, UC Berkeley did that with Ann Coulter, where they kept moving around her room and they kept saying they didn't have rooms available. They said the same thing to me a week ago. There was some public outcry, and now they're offering some rooms, which I hope that event goes forward. It's not rare. They do this a lot. A private university that did it was DePaul University. I was threatened with arrest if I set foot on campus. I actually showed up there, and a security guard told me, I asked him, if I move 6 inches forward, are you going to arrest me? And he said yes, and he had the sheriff of Cook County behind him. So this is, it's become a cover for ideological discrimination, because if Ta-Nehisi Coates wants to speak on these campuses, there's not going to be any problem. The administrators will make certain that time, place, and manner restrictions don't get in the way. And this is why I say, saying that the discretion of administrators is wonderful is all well and good, except that they very often are attempting to achieve a particular political end by using means that are normally legitimate, and that's definitely a dangerous thing. If you don't mind, I have a quick note on something that I think it was Mr. Lawrence was saying earlier about the damage that's done to students by various things that happen on campus, by threats of violence and this sort of thing. And obviously, everyone, I think, agrees that what happened to Taylor is unacceptable. But one of the things that I think should also be pointed out is we have a lot of other students in the crowd and administrators who spend an enormous amount of time pushing stuff like white privilege means that you must accept that you are subordinate in terms of your view because of identity. This also has some lasting damage with regard to First Amendment exercise and with regard to how people perceive the freedom of the country. And I understand that this is universally held belief among university educators that we have to accept the guilt of particular races or particular sexual orientations for discrimination that's happened in the past. But when you teach a bunch of 18 and 19-year-old people this, you shouldn't be surprised when, number one, they go into hiding with their viewpoint, or number two, they become frustrated. It's an absurdity to suggest that you can tell people that their viewpoints are out of line because of their identity. At the same time, you're telling other people that their viewpoints are completely in line because of their identity, and that any assault on their senses must be protected or prevented at any cost.
Well, I would just like to point out in closing that the group, Young Americans for Liberty, that is handing out constitutions on campuses all across the country, has changed free speech restrictions on 25 campuses just by handing out this document, not by setting fires because they didn't like the speaker or throwing rocks through windows, but by handing out this Constitution. And I am inspired that there are young people who are inspired by this document, and it should never be illegal to hand out this document.
Well said.